A dash of mystery, a sparkle of magic, and all things cozy. Join your host, Elle Hartford, for Cozy Alchemy, a proud member of the Authors on the Air network. Hello and welcome to Cozy Alchemy, the podcast all about cozy botanical books. I'm Elle, and I'm here with Emily Krempholtz, author of Violet Thistlewaite is Not a Villain Anymore. We will get to that in just a minute. But first, Emily's going to start us off with a game of two truths and a lie.
Ha 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 ha. All right. Let's see. I had to put my poker face on real quick. Okay.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Number one. Okay. Number one, I love to ski. Number two, I do some of my best writing when I'm out walking. And number three, I once lived out of a backpack for a year.
Ooh, okay. And I was going to say, don't even worry. I'm terrible at telling when people are lying. You would think this would be practice. Ooh, but those are all good ones. I can definitely relate to the writing while walking, at least the having ideas for me while walking. So that one I feel like is pretty solid. Backpack for a year or skiing. Both of those are adventurous. I am going to go on a whim and say that skiing is the lie.
Skiing is the lie. I live in Colorado. I live in the Rocky Mountains, and I have never once been on a pair of skis in my entire life. I'm much more of like a summer sports kind of gal. Like I love hiking. I love being out there in nature and camping and having all that kind of fun when there is no snow on the ground. But
Fair. I have to admit, I went to college in Salt Lake City and was essentially forced to learn how to ski. So it's kind of impressive that you can be in Colorado and
honestly,
avoid it
at this
entirely.
point, it's a bragging point. My partner worked at a ski resort for several years, and he snowboards and does all that. And he always jokes that he doesn't want me to learn because then he would get back into it, and it's like a drug to him. He's like, I would absolutely fall right back in, and it would be a whole problem for us. So
that's fair. All right. Well, before we get into book stuff, can I ask? So it's true, the living out of a backpack for a year.
Yeah.
So traveling.
Yes. Like years and years ago, my partner and I, we sold all of our stuff and we left the country for a year, and we traveled and we lived with strangers and volunteered with strangers, and we saw some amazing things and met some amazing people, and we were gone for quite a while. And it's a trip that we look back on so fondly. I love to travel. I love to meet new people and hear other people's stories and just kind of, try out different lives a little bit. And that was an incredible experience.
So cool. Where did you go?
We stuck to Europe for that trip. We worked on a cider orchard in Wales, made some amazing friends there, and we worked on a horse ranch in Croatia. I grew up with horses, was one of the other ones I was going to maybe use for one of my two truths and a lie. We taught English in Hungary and Poland, and we went to a friend's wedding in Italy, and worked at a grocery store in Luxembourg, and basically just kind of like bounced around and helped people, renovate their houses or work on their businesses, and just kind of had like a cultural exchange for a year. And it was really, really cool.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, that's amazing. Now, were you writing then? Would you consider yourself a writer? So was it like collecting inspiration a little bit in the back of your mind?
A lot of it, yeah. I've very much, I've known I wanted to be an author since I was 5 years old. I'm one of those. But
Nice.
I hadn't really like taken myself seriously until that trip. And I think a lot of it was because, I didn't have rent. I didn't have a lot of other financial responsibilities other than just what I was doing at the time. And so I was able to, during that trip, start freelancing and start working as a writer and start building up, here's what I want to do, and start taking myself a little more seriously with the stories I wanted to write. And I kind of did the digital nomad thing for the first time, in a way that was really fun and really exciting for me. And kind of taught me by the time we got back home, like, hey, wait a second, I do actually want to make this a priority. Up until then, writing had very much been something that I did on the side, and that, I worked a 9 to 5, and I would come home at the end of the day and I was exhausted, and make myself dinner or whatever was in the fridge. And then I'd sit down and be like, okay, now it's time to work on this book that I've been working on for 6 years or whatever. And it was very much a side thing. So that trip, I really, really credit with giving me the little bit of a push that I needed to be able to take myself seriously as a writer. And I'm so grateful for that.
That's so cool, and is a perfect segue into your book. Again, that's Violet Thistlewaite is not a villain anymore. There we go. Which is so much fun, and is also coming out, I think next week by the time this airs. Can you tell us a little bit about it to get us started?
Yeah, so Violet Thistlewaite is not a villain anymore is a cozy fantasy romance about a very powerful plant witch named Violet Thistlewaite who has spent her entire life working for an evil sorcerer. And after he's defeated, she decides to turn over a new leaf and open a flower shop in a small town, much to the chagrin of the grumpy alchemist who lives next door. And the story really follows her as she kind of, tries to start this new life and find redemption for herself. And even when her past comes knocking on her door, really grapple with the fact, or the question of whether a former villain ever deserves a happily ever after.
Right. And yes, very much love that central question. And so we'll kind of get into that in stages. The first being the kind of the big question, right, is you are writing about a reformed villain. Like, what drew you to that in particular?
So there's a kind of a silly story behind that. I mean, first of all, like, one of my favorite tropes in fiction is when the villain has to kind of reluctantly join forces with the heroes, or when the villain kind of has to switch sides, and whether that's for a short period of time or for a longer period of time. Those kinds of stories have always fascinated me. I love them. But Violet in particular came about because I walked into the living room and my partner was playing a video game and was sitting on the couch and fighting some big bad evil guy, and there were all these minions, and he's fighting all of them, and I'm like, you don't know about those people. Maybe that person's just doing this because they're trying to put their kid through college, and maybe that one has hopes and dreams outside of this, and maybe that one just wants to open a flower shop. And we kind of riffed on that for a while, and then the thought stuck with me, and I was like, what makes somebody become a villain, and why would somebody do some of that very kind of menial minion work, the stuff where you're not the big boss, you don't get all the glory, but you're somebody who is still doing the thing, and what drives someone to do that. So that was kind of the inspiration that sparked Violet, and then took on a whole life of its own from there.
I love that. That's so much fun. I have to admit, and this is totally a tangent, but on the same vein, because I don't play a whole lot of video games, but I play Final Fantasy 14, right, which is MMO. And people do a lot of like fan arts and fan comics of it. And one of the comics that I've seen is, you're sneaking into the enemy base, which is just like open in the world. So there's NPCs just like standing around who will only fight you if you come like within, if you come close to them. So this comic is like one of the NPCs just like standing, like not looking at the player character, being like, just don't engage.
Stay away.
Yeah.
I don't need this.
Yeah. So that is a lot of fun. But okay, aside from just kind of the joy and the humor of it, was writing about redemption important to you from the start?
Absolutely. I think, like I said, I love those stories of villains who, end up working with the good guys and who end up changing. And I think really what became the core of this story for me was that concept of change. I really wanted to explore what it takes to earn redemption, and to feel like you earn redemption on an intrinsic level as well as, on an external level, and what the difference between those things are. I wanted to play with a character who was not being forced to redeem herself, but really wanted it and doesn't quite feel that she's deserving of it. And I wanted to play with kind of the idea that redemption is something you have to work for, and you know, ask that question of, can you really become someone else? Can you really change? Can you really start over? And you know, I won't answer that question. That's absolutely something that I want you to discover for your own in the book. Yeah, but but that question of change, that question of redemption, is something that really drove me throughout here, and I had a lot of fun playing with it from the standpoint of a lot of different characters, not just Violet, because I think the thing is that even if you're not someone who used to work for an evil supervillain, everybody has parts of themselves that they might look back on and they might think, you know, I want to do better. I want to be better than I was before. And so I wanted to play with the idea of how do we earn that? How do we create that for ourselves, and what kind of work goes into that?
That's so cool. Yeah. And I love the kind of added elements of choice and intention that you're putting in there. Absolutely. And also, bringing up that the same is true for other characters, which feeds very well into my next question, because it is a romance. So we have Violet finding love, and she has like this very like grumpy sunshine dynamic with Nathaniel, right? The alchemist. But I love that the idea of like, what do I want to be better about, or what have I done that maybe I regret? For Nathaniel also, what gave you the idea for him?
I mean, he very much started out kind of as a foil for Violet. I really like to write romantic arcs as two characters kind of approaching the same question or the same problem, but from very different angles. And so on one hand, we have, you know, Violet who really desperately wants to change, and she really wants to be a new person, and she really believes that she can start over, and that she can, you know, she can become someone new and someone good. And on the other hand, we have Nathaniel, who is a person who has maybe made some attempts at change in the past and doesn't really believe that it's possible. He kind of ends up right back where he started, and he's really jaded by those events in his life. And so having those two characters kind of come at that from opposite ends was something that really intrigued me, and something I wanted to explore. And kind of that again, that question of, is change possible? Is it possible to become a new person? Is it possible to leave your past behind? And yeah, so he started out very much as an exploration of that. He then, you know, grew into so much more. I love Nathaniel. I had a lot of fun writing him with all of his very neurotic and anxious tendencies, and which are, you know, I'm a person who deals with a lot of anxiety, and so writing that into a character was kind of cathartic for me in a lot of ways. And yeah, I like to see where the two of them ended up from where they began.
Absolutely, yeah. We've talked in previous conversations I've had on the podcast, have kind of centered on that too, and how I think cozy genres in particular can have that kind of cathartic or healing feel to them, right? Because we do tend to have characters who have our own foibles, right? You have this slower pace and this kind of more internal focus that allows you to like address or, you know, see a character working with anxiety or
absolutely. I think there's like this kind of misconception almost that cozy means, oh, everything's so sweet and happy-go-lucky, and you know, there's no stakes, and there's no, you know, there's no deep dark content. But I very much reject that. I think that cozy for me feels like those things can exist because they exist in life, and cozy is very much a slice of life in so many ways. And what it more means to me is the understanding from page one. Just as you go into a romance with the understanding that there's going to be a happily ever after, you go into a cozy with the understanding that, hey, things might get hard. They might, but we're going to hold your hand through this. Everybody's going to come out of it okay. And so you have that kind of knowledge going in, and you have kind of, I think, like that safer space to then explore any of those darker themes, any of those more emotional topics with that understanding and with that comfort. You know, you have the security that like everybody, it's going to be okay. We're going to get out of this. We're going to get through this together. And you know, it's that togetherness. It's that community, which is another such an important part of cozy fantasy. So yeah, I like kind of towing the line with some of those darker themes and, you know, making sure that it still feels like it's going to work out in the end.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with everything you just said. But kind of on, I guess, like, shifting gears just a little bit.
Yeah.
So, okay. Listeners probably know this about me, but I'm very biased, right? I write a mystery series with an alchemist. I put alchemy into the podcast title. So very much appreciated the running themes of like alchemy and botany in your book. It was so much fun. Did you know going in that you wanted to incorporate those? Like, how was it?
I honestly, you know, looking back, I don't even know what it was that initially drew me to alchemy. I've always been one of, you know, I grew up one of those kids that would like go out into the woods and like make like potions and like, you know, with god awful ingredients that nobody should ever have gone near, to be clear. But and so I've always really been drawn to kind of that like apothecary aesthetic and using, you know, herbs and making potions and just that to me felt very aesthetic and felt very cozy. I think ultimately what I found in alchemy and what I found in that form of magic for Nathaniel in particular is, again, that sense of change. And the same with botany, too. You know, Violet's plant magic. Plants and alchemy are, by nature, agents of change. You are literally transforming a seed into a sprout, into a tree, into a piece of fruit, into a pie, because we're cozy here. And, you know, and alchemy is the literal act of magically transforming something from one state into another. And so as I kind of got further into it and as I explored Nathaniel a lot more too, again, you know, I'm approaching that question of change from those two different angles. We have Violet, who is really, really attempting to, you know, tap into this new form of magic that is good and that is different, and she's changing and she's growing. And then on Nathaniel's side, we have a person who, again, you know, his magic is by nature change. He's rejecting it. He doesn't think that his time he doesn't think that it's there for him, that his time has passed, and that, you know, this isn't something that is possible for him, even though he loves it. And so I think there are two types of magic really played off each other really nicely when it came to exploring, again, those themes. And yeah, so like I said, I don't know exactly that it was a conscious decision for me to do that at the beginning. I certainly should probably, you know, rewind this interview a couple minutes and be like, yes, I meant to do that from the get-go. But it worked out really, really nicely to be able to explore those themes with that magic.
Yeah, no. It's a beautiful answer. 100%. But also kind of goes to something else that's come up on the podcast before of, okay, and before I get too deep into this question, where on the scale are you more of a plotter or a pantser with your writing?
I am such a plotter. It is. I am a spreadsheets girly. I have worksheets that I have designed. I have an entire, back there on my shelf somewhere is a big giant sketchbook that I call my big black book of secrets that I have. I generally, when I start a new book, I will take color-coded Post-its and lay them all out on my coffee table and sort through exactly how I want the book to work. And I have different colors for different characters and different story elements and all sorts of ridiculous things. And then after I'm done, I transfer those all into that giant sketchbook, and I have, you know, probably like 10, 15 years worth of stories recorded in there. Some are terrible and will hopefully never see the light of day. But I love to take a step back and be able to see a story from a higher vantage point. And then I love to get all the way in and let it all surprise me, because there's always going to be something that changes from my outline. It never stays exactly the same as I think it's going to be when I start, or when, I re-outline in the middle of a process sometimes, and then I'll go back in and be like, actually, no, I'm going to change this some more. But yes, I'm a plotter.
What an amazing record, I have to say, of like the stories that you've written. It's like scrapbooking almost. That's so
Some
cool.
of it's kind of cringy, but it is really cool to have that to look back on, and to be able to see my own development as a storyteller, and to be able to kind of see some ideas that have followed me throughout multiple books, projects that I shelved partway through, but been like, I really liked this. Maybe I'll just snag that and pull that out and use it in here. And it's cool kind of watching myself turn into the writer that I am. And, I hopefully continually watch myself turn into the writer I will become as I continue to keep track of that kind of thing. So,
okay.
Some call it hoarding. I call it record keeping, but it's fine. We're fine.
It's record keeping. Absolutely. But that kind of brings it back around to what I was trying to get at. Was I've had conversations usually with pantsers, right? So people who don't plot at all will come on and will tell me, well, I don't necessarily feel like I need to plot out because, some seeds that I sow when I'm first starting, in the early draft, as I get later in the book or in further edits, I'll realize, oh, this is perfect. This can come back around and, fill this hole or serve this theme and so that's why what made me think of it was you talking about alchemy, right? And how you didn't necessarily intend to, but it does wonderfully underline the theme of change. And I love how, not only the characters' kind of opinions and goals and ambitions, but also their professions lend to this theme of change. So, knowing that you are instead very much a plotter, and still this kind of thinking, this magic gets in through the cracks, I think is very wonderful. But also, as you're saying, you're looking at this book and it's a record of how you have grown too. So I love this idea that not only can we be surprised by the things that we're writing and how they come together, but also by ourselves and our own growth.
Absolutely. And I think, change is an ongoing process. It is a constant, every new experience that we have, every, new choice that we make, and new thing that we do, and those things all kind of culminate to create us as the people that we are. And I'm very much, a big believer in the fact that all of those things, all of those Post-its jammed into that book behind me, have like I said, helped create Violet. Even if Violet didn't exist, even if Nathaniel didn't exist, those are things that have all built together over the years, and over me making mistake after mistake after mistake, and trying new things and experimenting and getting rejection and getting my hopes up and getting here and there. All of those things add up to this moment right now where I'm talking with you. And that's super cool that all of those little puzzle pieces come together to make one big picture. So I don't know if that...
Well, and kind of, it's just magic. That's just what it is.
It is.
But kind of on that note, but getting maybe a little bit back to being book-centered. We've kind of touched on it before, right? Part of the idea of Cozy is having the community of supporting characters, as well as, the characters, the setting, that sort of thing. You have some very fun side characters in your book. Did you end up with any favorites?
Bartleby, I think, accidentally stole the show for a lot of this book. He was so much fun to write. I am the kind of person who anthropomorphizes everything. And, you know, like my car has a name and my houseplants all have names. There's a cutting from the original Bartleby sitting right behind me. No. You know, like there's so you know, we have a pothos named Bartleby in our home, and we, you know, like to give everybody personality and stuff. And it is very much something that I threw in to Violet as kind of like just like a side thing at first. And then he truly took on a life of his own. The second my editor first read Violet, she was like, I love this plant. I would do anything for this plant. What I need more Bartleby. And so it's been like a funny progression for him. But of the other side characters too, I really like Prue. I think that she's somebody who I see a lot of myself in terms of like her own journey of wanting a life and not quite being ready to go for it yet. You know, like I said, I didn't take my own writing seriously for a really long time. And so I see like with her and her music and kind of her dreams that she's kind of put on hold a lot of myself in there. And I relate to that a lot. And I think that she's just a lovely friend with a lot of personality and you know, willingness to tell both Violet and Nathaniel what's what when they need it.
Yes, we always need somebody who's willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and on that note, do you have plans to continue writing in this world?
I do. So there is every book in this world I want to be a standalone. There will be some familiar faces. The second book is written and it is turned in and we are in edits, and that one is a ton of fun. And I do, you know, have some more ideas and plans for things in the future, and we'll have to see what happens. But no, you are not done seeing this world and, you know, cameos of at least some of the characters that you know. And yeah, I'm very excited for what comes next.
Awesome. That is great news. Okay, I ask this of everybody. If you could go back and talk to yourself when you were just starting out, what advice would you give?
I mean, like we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think I would absolutely encourage myself to take myself more seriously when it comes to my creativity. Like I said, I've known I've wanted to do this my whole life, and I put it off for such a long time. You know, I didn't take my art seriously. I didn't take my writing seriously. I didn't take my own desires for my life as seriously as I could have. And that's something that I wish I had done sooner, while also recognizing that, you know, like I said, all of those Post-its and all those mistakes add up to where I am now, and I love where I am now. But I think that, you know, that sense of just go for it is something that I wish I had internalized a little bit sooner. A good friend of mine years ago told me, leap and the net will appear. And it was right before I had packed up all my stuff and moved out to Colorado, you know, without ever having been here before. And it's something I think about all the time, you know, like we will create our own net in so many ways. But big changes feel really scary and will continue to feel scary even when you're doing them. So yeah, I think I would tell myself to just go for it sooner, and why wait? You know, you know in your heart what you want to do it. Find a way to make it work.
It's hard though, right? It's hard.
There's
There's always a reason not to take yourself
much easier said than done.
Yeah. So I get it, but I also love what you pointed out about timing. There's a feeling of, you know, all this time I could have, if I had only trusted myself sooner, if I had taken the leap, but also at the same time, like, okay, I was kind of practicing my craft. I was getting better. I was filling up my notebook.
You know, I was writing books at 22 years old, but I could not have written Violet. And I love this story. I love this book and the story that I was able to tell. And that's something that I was only ever able to write because of the experiences that I've had, and because of, you know, the realizations that have come to me through time and through experience. And that's something that I think it's such a catch-22, you know, it's such a double-edged thing, you know. Yes, of course I wish I could have taken myself seriously sooner, but at the same time, I think it's all, you know, it happened when it needed to happen and when it was ready to happen, and I got myself where I wanted to be. So
yeah, that's lovely. Lovely. Okay. Our last question. What is one win you've had in the past week, big or small?
Ooh, one win that I have had is, this is so small, but it is very exciting for me. I love fall. I had my first hot coffee of the season this week because it finally cooled down enough. I go out for my little morning walks. I wake up generally first thing in the morning. I go for a walk. I do a lot of like voice to text notes for like what I want to write that day. And I have a couple cafes in the area where they know me by name. They know my drink order, whatever. And I have been drinking my iced lattes all summer, and this week I finally got to have a hot latte, and it was wonderful. And I wore like a little fall sweater, and it was just like, it was that feeling of like, you know, fall is in the air, and it just feels so nice and crisp, and I feel so cozy, and it's so inspiring to me. So
yeah,
that's my little win.
Yeah, absolutely perfect and very cozy, as you pointed out. And oh my gosh, I'm so with you. I live in New Jersey now, and the summer we had was intense. So,
yeah.
Yes, wearing a sweater. That's yeah.
Yes,
it was also
it's
a big
so
win
exciting.
For me this week. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to get all the rest of my sweaters and cozy clothes out of the closet soon and get them all ready so I can wear them. And yeah.
Yes. So ready. Okay. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah, great. Okay. I will have, of course, your links and your bio and everything in the show notes for people to find. Everyone should go read your book, naturally. Thank you. Thank you. And for listeners, I will talk to you next time. Cozy Alchemy is brought to you by Authors on the Air, and our theme music is by Cyberwave Orchestra. For everything else, blame Elle. You can find her online at ellehartford.com.